Greetings, guys. Hopefully you are well and weathering this situation. I'm always thinking of you guys, so I'm hoping some of the previous videos educating on the virus and some of the therapies out there, testing, has helped you out. I've got a lot of questions. One of the more important ones, though, is from a lot of you guys, especially through email, because you've given me some personal information about how you are concerned because you're living with somebody who is at higher risk for coronavirus, and also don't forget for other viruses as well. You know, let's not forget that still at this point, if you're living with a high-risk individual, the flu mathematically is at this point still more of a concern. That probably will change in the next few weeks. But the question is, how do you prevent contaminating your house and contaminating that person to possibly cause an infection when at some point you do have to go out there and buy groceries and supplies and things like that? So that's what this video is going to cover. Basically, how to prevent bringing the virus into your house. And this is going to cover what is called Sterile Technique. Sterile Technique is a technique that pretty much all medical professionals and especially scientists, and especially scientists who have worked in virology like I have, and I'm going to show you the actual laboratory techniques that scientists use when they are working with viruses so that they make sure they don't not only infect themselves, but also infect others and carry contamination outside of what we call the dirty field. So let's get started. The first thing you have to do is prepare. So let's get prepared for a shopping trip. Okay, a lot of this is going to be overkill, but my purpose for this video is I want to show you the proper sterile technique. The more of these tactics that you employ, the more likely you are to prevent carrying virus into your home. So you want to use whatever ones you feel comfortable with. Do keep in mind some of these are going to be way more important than others, particularly proper use of gloves. The dirtiest thing that there is on the planet is the gloves. People get this false sense of security when they wear gloves, when actually those gloves are spreading the virus more than any other single thing on your body or that you wear or touch. So we're going to talk a lot about gloves in a little bit. So if nothing else, the hand hygiene is what you want to take away from this. But if you are really concerned about coronavirus or other viruses, you will want to employ all these methods. Again, the more you employ, the better you'll be. So what I'm bringing with me is a face mask. I've got a few garbage bags. I have a large fitting external change of clothes. We're actually going to wear an outer layer of clothing. The top here is a zipper top, which I'll show you. Do not wear a pullover. The reason being because if we're assuming we're contaminated with virus, if we take a pullover off, you're bringing that virus up over your face. It's the worst possible technique you can have. So you want something zippered or buttoned up. All right, some other items. Got some hand sanitizer here, at least 63% alcohol in that. Also have some disinfectant spray. You can use any disinfectant spray pretty much, like Lysol, whatever. In the actual laboratory, we use 75% 2-propanol. You guys probably know it as isopropanol. It's what we use in the lab. It's a very good denaturant. Denaturant means it basically destroys the proteins. So you can use that if you want and put it in a spray bottle. Also have some gloves and an extra pair of shoes. Shoes, one of the things, remember, the virus is most likely to be transmitted through cough, sneeze, stuff like that. And those droplets eventually end up on the floor, so the floor is a good way to pick up some contamination. What we're mostly concerned about with this particular setup is more what we refer to as fomite transmission, F-O-M-I-T-E. Also, sometimes different pronunciation, foamies, F-O-M-E-S. I like that one, it sounds cuter. But either way, that is transmission off of surfaces, and that's basically what we are looking to protect ourselves from, especially from the fact that in the grocery store, everybody's touching everything, and once again, everybody's got their gloves. They somehow think that gloves are some kind of magic shield that doesn't pick up virus. It's the exact opposite. So your stockers, your checkout clerks, all the people working in the warehouse, they're wearing gloves and potentially contaminating because they don't change their gloves. So when you walk into the grocery store, basically you want to imagine that everything in there is covered in coronavirus. Yes, the gloves prevent it from getting on your hands, but you still have it on the gloves. So when you do things like answer a cell phone or scratch your nose, stuff like that, touch your credit card, those gloves are spreading the virus if there is some there. So that's the most important thing. Let's keep that in mind. What we're going to do now is get ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my change of clothes on. So I'm going to put on my big baggy outer pants. Okay, and I have opted for my outerwear for somewhat comical purposes to wear my DNA sweatshirt where when you zip it up, the base is anneal. All right, we are now ready to go. My gloves, I'm going to take a few of my gloves and I'm going to put them in my clean pocket. I'm going to have a clean pocket and a dirty pocket. The gloves go in my clean pocket along with my hand sanitizer. I do not need the cell phone. In a laboratory situation, you do not bring your cell phone into a contaminated field, not even bringing that. Got my credit card payment stuff that goes into my clean pocket for now because it's going to get contaminated later. Got my shoes, my disinfectant spray, my garbage bags, and my mask. And we are going to put these into the back of the car. I want to be prepared for when we unload the groceries, since that is the point we would be bringing virus into the house. And actually, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to set up here. This is going to be my clean table. I have it as my clean table because it's closest to the entry of my house. And then I have another table over here. This is going to be my dirty table. This is where we're going to unpack and sterilize groceries. Okay, now we're ready to go. All right, needless to say, I am not actually going into the grocery store. I'm sure it would freak people out plenty. So really at the grocery store, there is really basically only one rule, and that is that you do not touch your face or any of your personal effects without first sterilizing your hands or changing gloves or whatever. So the first thing before we go in is I'm going to put the face mask on. So put the face mask on. Once you put your face mask on, you cannot take it off until you leave the store. You do not touch your face mask. If you bring your cell phone in, you don't put a cell phone up to your face mask. I'm going to put my gloves on. This is the only time my gloves are going to be sterile. And actually what I am going to do is another technique. I am actually going to double glove. The reason being because if for whatever reason I find that I may have got some contamination, I can just remove the outer pair of gloves. I'm putting my cuff inside. There are some other gloves with really long cuffs that you can get. So now I've double gloved. This is my last chance to adjust my face mask. Ladies, you're going to want to have your hair tied back in a bun or ponytail so you're not constantly playing with your face, getting hair out of your eyes. You're going to see a lot of entertaining things when you walk into this store now. You're going to see people drinking coffee with their contaminated gloves. I've seen people give a baby a pacifier with their contaminated gloves. Once you walk into that store, the first thing you touch, your assumption is it is covered in coronavirus. Your gloves are the dirtiest things there are. As a matter of fact, it's a way to get fired if you work in a laboratory. If they see you walking out of a laboratory, pushing an elevator button with gloves, something like that, you can get in some pretty big trouble. You never shake hands with somebody with gloves. Scientists look at gloves as a major threat, and you should too. That's where you're going to catch virus, is people improperly using this. Okay, so I'm going to make my last adjustment. Having a beard like I have is definitely not optimal, but to be honest with you, I don't wear any PPE when I go to a store. I just use basic personal hygiene. I don't really freak out about viruses that much. Trust me, I've worked with a lot worse. But anyway, this is our last chance to be ready. We go into the store, make sure you got your sanitizer, your extra gloves, and make sure you've got your payment, your keys, everything like that. That's all right now clean, so we're not worried about it. It goes in your clean pocket. When you go into the store, again, the first thing you touch, your gloves are contaminated, so you're going to think very carefully about going into your clean pocket, about getting your keys, things like that. You're definitely not touching the face mask. You're keeping your hands away from your face. There's only so much you can do in the grocery store. There's lots of things where you can pick things up only by your fingertips, whatever. The bottom line, you assume everything is covered in virus. You do not know what is clean and what is not, so you always assume it is dirty. The idea of shopping to try to keep things sterile and clean, quite honestly, it's a waste of time, and we're going to address it anyway when we get back to the car. The only thing you want to be careful of is touching your personal property as well as your face. So the one thing to be worried about is come payment time. So when it's time to go and make payment, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I want to, if possible, use the self-checkout line, because that grocery clerk is a just virus spreading index case, okay? His gloves have touched every single person's product all day. You do not want that guy touching your product. One thing we can do, remember, our gloves are contaminated, and we're about to get our payment or cash or whatever, get our wallet, go into the purse. We cannot do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just my fingertips, and I'm going to remove my outer glove. Now I'm not going to snap it off like that because I don't want to fling virus everywhere. Just very gently, not touching my skin, removing my outer pair of gloves, only touching the inside of the gloves, which wouldn't have virus, throwing that away. Now, with my clean, uncontaminated gloves, I have some decisions I want to make. Maybe I want the grocery clerk to sterilize their hands or wear gloves. Now, reaching in my clean pocket, I can offer the grocery clerk some clean gloves, ask them to change it. If I had an immunocompromised person at home, I would probably do that. At least ask them to use hand sanitizer to sterilize their gloves from the 2,000 other people that they contaminated on. Get their gloves clean. The other thing I'm going to do at this point right now is bring out my payment method, as long as my hands are clean and I've got my credit card or whatever here. Now, if the clerk is doing my groceries, I do not touch anything until it comes payment time. I'll then swipe my credit card, or if you have to hand him the credit card and you get something back, remember, as soon as you get it back, you assume it's contaminated because he's been touching the groceries, which is your source of virus. At that point, your gloves are no longer clean anymore. That means your credit card has to go into your dirty pocket now. We will clean it up later. If I'm self-bagging, well, that's actually a little more tricky. If I'm self-bagging, I am contaminating my gloves. So at this point, I would not have removed my outer layer of gloves yet. I would have self-bagged once everything's in the bag, then remove the gloves, get your payment, swipe it. Because you've swiped or entered cash or touched the computer there, again, that glove is contaminated at that point. You would have to remove the glove or sterilize it with your hand sanitizer, whatever. So you're very conscientious about the hands, very much so. Either way, at this point, we've got our groceries in the bag. We've got our dirty, contaminated card in our dirty pocket. We're ready to exit the store. So I'm going to assume that everything here is contaminated. So let's make our way to the car and let's talk about what we're going to do. Okay, my groceries would normally be still in my shopping cart, but at this point right now, I am assuming myself and my groceries are covered head to toe in pathogens. So how are we going to handle this? Well, the first thing we do is we don't take off our face mask because our hands are contaminated, everything's contaminated. What I want to do is I want to tie these bags like this and keep them sealed up, because most of the virus potential is going to be now trapped inside those bags. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove my gloves. And again, when I remove the gloves, the technique I'm using, take it off, ball up the one glove, and then just touching from the inside of the cuff, bring it around so that you trap your first glove, minimizing your waste. This part of the glove is safe. We're going to discard it. Now, with my clean hands, I can open my car door or the trunk. What I've done is I've got my disinfectant spray and another pair of gloves. We're very careful here because we are going to bring virus into our car. So we're going to be a little bit nervous about that, right? Now, the virus should be trapped in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray the outside of the bag with my disinfectant, the other one as well. I'm then going to spray a little bit of the disinfectant on my hands and also disinfect the can itself. Got to remember, when you pick up a can of disinfectant with contaminated hands, you are contaminating that as well. And I'm going to put my groceries inside the clean garbage bag with my clean gloves. I'm going to hold it away from my face and tie up the bag. Do not hold the bag and push the air out. Remember, if you push the air out, you're pushing that contaminated air up into your face. Okay, now I'm going to take off my outer clothing wear, leaving my gloves and my mask on, and remembering that I've got a dirty pocket with my payment here, so I want to make sure that I memorize that. Another thing you could do if you're worried about forgetting, you could take your dirty card and put it in with your groceries so that you can sterilize it at that point. I'm just going to leave it in my pocket for now. And I'm going to take off my outer clothing, turning it inside out, and placing it into a garbage bag. Same thing with my baggy pants now. Now, as I do this, I'm very careful to try to take them off inside out, peeling them inside out. So we trap virus inside of it, into the bag. Gloves are pretty frickin' dirty right now. What do you think about taking the face mask off? No way. We take off the gloves using our Sterile Technique into our dirty bag, and now with my clean hands, my mask, don't reach into the bag, just toss it into the bag, using the outside of the bag and aiming away from my face, sealing the bag. Again, you don't want to squeeze that air out towards you. This again containing the virus inside, so we want to tie up that bag, and this stuff is going to go into the laundry as soon as we get home. Going to spray the outside of the bag with our disinfectant. You can also use a sterile wipe to make sure you cover all the surfaces. And now, yes, we are bringing virus home with us, but it is contained within the plastic. Final step, disinfect my hands with my hand sanitizer. Use a good amount of it, get it under your fingernails, and then also a little bit more to decontaminate the container itself. Alrighty, I am now virus-free, so I'm not going to shed virus in the car and trap it in the car with me. We are good to go. Okay, we have driven back home. Again, I'm confidently virus-free, but we've got contaminated groceries and contaminated clothing and my contaminated personal effects all trapped in the plastic bags. What are we going to do now? What I'm going to do is the first thing, I'm going to go inside, not worry about it right now, take a shower, once again, put on 2 sets of clothes. I'm all cleaned up. I've got New outer layers of clothes on, again, just like I'm going back into the grocery store for this next part. I'm also thinking, is there any mistakes that I made? Where could I have gone wrong? One thing I was thinking of, did I remember to sterilize my hands before I reached into my clean pocket for my keys? Are my keys contaminated? This is your chance to make sure, because you don't get another chance after this. I'm not worried so much about my contaminated clothes and the credit card and all the stuff that I put into the trash bag for my outerwear. I can wash that later at any time. I can keep it in quarantine. Again, you shouldn't be going out anyway, so I'm not too worried about that right now. What I want to do is I want to sterilize my groceries. So I'm going to take my groceries, and again, virus inside this bag. And I'm going to go over to my dirty table, and I'm going to unpack my groceries onto my dirty table. This bag is contaminated, turning it inside out, folding it up, throwing it in the trash. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to bring out all of my groceries. And again, we're assuming everything inside these bags is covered in virus. Notice I could not find any toilet paper. All right, these bags, throw away. Okay, now I've got my sanitizer spray so I can sanitize my groceries. Just one problem though. Remember, I just took out all these dirty groceries, which we are assuming are covered in virus, and I have now contaminated my disinfectant spray can. So there's a couple ways around this. One way is to just live with that, and we will disinfect that later. You can disinfect your hands with it and then disinfect the can as well. Probably a better technique at this point is to use disinfectant wipes, because you can get new wipes each time. We're going to get our disinfectant wipes and we're going to wipe the outside of each item. Then, using the wipe as a handle, I'm going to bring it over to my sterile area. Now it's on my sterile area. Notice I'm trying to keep my sterile glove and everything right over here. I'm not reaching all the way across like this, keeping it right here, easy to reach, on to the next item. All right, after every couple of items or so, I'm going to change the sterile wipe. And then also, it never hurts to change your gloves. It's never wrong to change gloves. Again, using the sterile wipe as a handle, carrying it over and into my sterile area. All right, if you have another person available, that person can go ahead and take those sterile items into the house for you. It is definitely recommended, actually, if you do that. But the items on the sterile table, those are good to bring inside. You're not bringing virus. This is our area of concern, and also myself and my clothes, and especially gloves. Constantly spraying my gloves down all the time to make sure that I don't recontaminate what I'm wiping down with my contaminated gloves. I'm also careful of things that I buy. So things in paper containers are much harder to sterilize. Things in odd-shaped jars, much harder to sterilize. So something like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually spray, wipe it down, open it, and then bring it over and dump out the contents onto the sterile table so that we have individual contents. Especially with a paper container like this, it's a lot more porous, it's harder to disinfect. Okay, we're now going to fold up our dirty field. We have a couple of options here. One is, because I have double gloved again, I can bunch up my dirty pad here and then fold it up inside of my gloves so I minimize that amount of contaminated waste. Again, reaching from the inside, and we can fold this up over our contaminated waste so that we have a much smaller profile of contaminated waste. At this point, I'm almost done. Again, like before, we're going to remove the outer layers of clothing and the shoes. We're going to kick them over into the dirty clothes pile that we had before. Gloves. Again, holding from the inside where the virus couldn't have gotten past. And then finally, my mask. Now, the best thing for me to do is, again, shower. Probably a little overkill, but again, just showing you the proper technique. And then bring my sterile groceries into the house. No chance I have brought virus into the house. What about the dirty clothes? Basically, what we would do is we would, again, at a different time, because we don't want to do this in conjunction with our clean groceries, I would come out, go through my clothes, pick out anything like keys or credit cards, anything that I may have left in that. We would go through all that, again, wearing gloves, mask, whatever, and then we would put everything that needs to be washed into the garbage bag, take it downstairs, dump it right into the washing machine, discard the bag, discard your gloves, set it with detergent and hot water, and that will take care of it. Your shoes, the best thing to do, just leave them out and let them quarantine. You can also do that with some groceries. If you're not going to use some groceries for a long time, you can actually just leave them out to quarantine for a couple weeks. Things like fresh fruits, vegetables, they should be washed with soap and water. Remember, those are really high-risk items because people keep picking them up with their gloves looking for ones that are ripe or whatever. Those are pretty high risk. You're better off buying them bagged or canned even. If you're going to bring fresh produce home, you want to wash it with soap and water. You definitely have to keep in mind those are really high risk items. All right, this all covered now. You guys have been trained in the sterile technique. Let's just talk real briefly about a couple of mistakes that people commonly make with this sterile technique. All right, the first mistake people make is thinking that gloves offer protection. To be honest with you, if you think about it, you're almost safer not wearing gloves because it makes you kind of creeped out a little bit. You start sanitizing your hands more. You put these gloves on like this, and now you feel like Superman. I see people all the time who wear their gloves into the store. They touch everything. They got their produce. They do everything, and then they futz with their cell phone. They dig for their car keys. They wear the gloves driving home, contaminating their steering wheel, contaminating their doorknob. When you're wearing gloves, your first thought should be they are the source of contamination. Gloves are the worst. So really, that is the number one mistake, people not using gloves properly. Gloves are more likely to be far more contaminated than your hands. So just keep that in mind. Another mistake that people make is I read a lot of comments from people that say that what they do is they just go to the store, they buy the minimum amount they need, and they go to the self-checkout because they want to just have as little bit of product as possible so that it minimizes potential for contamination. That is actually completely backwards thinking. You want to do exactly the opposite. First of all, every single time you go to the grocery store, you are risking your chance for contamination dramatically. You want to minimize the trips to the store, not maximize them. The other thing is that every day that you go is more risky than the day before. So right now is your safest time to go because as more people get infected, you increase the chance of getting infected at the grocery store. 2 weeks from now, when we have double the number of infected people, a grocery store trip is much more risky than it is now. So you want to do exactly the opposite. Minimize your trips to the store. Your trips to the store are how you bring virus into your house. The more you do it, the more risky. And a final mistake, again, that people really overlook is forgetting to decontaminate their decontamination items. You're always thinking in terms of potential sources of contamination. All the time, it's kind of obsessive, especially when you do this stuff for a living. So anyway, hopefully that will help you guys to stay safe, keep any viruses, not just coronavirus, but keep any viruses out of your home. And you guys are now pretty educated in sterile technique to keep you and your loved ones safe. Hopefully that's helpful. We'll see you next time.